legislation that so clearly does not respond to the context that our country is living in? How did we get to a point where you can walk into the House of Commons and have legislation put in front of you that does not address the specific concerns that many Canadians of all backgrounds have about our current immigration levels? And that is fundamentally the result of what has been a concerted effort to stifle debate and criticism of immigration policy in this country. For a long time now, daring to ask a question about how immigration policy affects Canada, daring to criticize the Liberal status quo on immigration has gotten you smeared, labeled, name-called, fingers pointing in your face, people questioning whether you have compassion or concern for people of all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures. The reality is that they can finger point all they want. They can do all the name calling they want. They can do all the smearing they like. The reality is that we have a very specific purpose when we enter this House of Commons, which is to ask the fundamental question of what is best for Canada. In order to apply that lens to Bill C-71, we would need those three critical pieces of information. Number one, how many people are entering the country? Number two, are there appropriate vetting mechanisms in place and background checks? And number three, what is the impact that increasing the population even further will have on our economy? By not answering these questions, I have a very hard time understanding how any member in this House can say that this legislation is complete and deserving of a vote. In my view, this has failed every single measure of a logical, reasonable, common sense immigration and citizenship standard, and that is why we must oppose it. Lastly, what I will say is this: whether it's immigration policy, housing, citizenship, whatever it might be, it is imperative that we put the Canadian people first. And I do believe that this is a window into how that is not being met. Every time we vote in here, every time we come in here and debate a matter of legislation or policy, we should have at the top of mind the Canadian taxpayer, the Canadian who voted for us to be here, to represent our local communities and represent our interests. The immigration status quo in this country is not doing what's best for Canada. And I believe with this legislation, we're seeing a very clear example of that.
Holy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What a speech.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary at the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And this will be the second consecutive Conservative that has spoken in regards to the immigration system as a whole and tries to give glorification to Stephen Harper, who was a disaster on immigration. What they are glorifying is the fact that Stephen Harper, for example, cancelled the sponsoring of parents and grandparents. They literally deleted hundreds of thousands of people that were under the process of becoming permanent residents. You want to talk about cold immigration policies, go back to the Conservative years. What's important is the mixture of immigrants that are coming for permanent residence. We have annual targets that are set. That annual target is going to be coming out again. You will find, Madam Speaker, that there is a great benefit through immigration to Canada. The Conservatives of late are trying to give the impression that it's an us versus them. We should be proud of the diversity. Look at the immigration programs.
Sorry, I do have to allow for other questions. The Honourable Member for Durham.
Madam Speaker, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We have Canadians of all backgrounds concerned about the high immigration levels, the fact that population growth has outpaced jobs, housing, social services, and once again the Liberals go back to their old and tired playbook of trying to point fingers, smear, accuse you of not caring about people. I hear from my constituents all the time. Constituents from all different racial, cultural, religious backgrounds, and they are concerned about the strain that population growth is having on our quality of life, and that is why it is important that we ask serious questions about Bill C-71. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. What's become clear from the Conservative side is this. They're refusing to acknowledge that what Bill C-71 does is to restore the rights of Canadians that was taken away from them unconstitutionally 15 years ago by the Conservatives. That's what we're talking about. These are not immigrants. They are Canadians. They were deemed to be a lower class Canadians by the Conservatives. And then they keep saying that the NDP and the Liberals voted with them on Bill C-37 15 years ago. Do you know why, Madam Speaker? Because Stephen Harper, the Conservative, at that time put out an edict and said if the bill was not passed unanimously, it would mean that none of the war veterans, the war brides, would go to their graves without their citizenship, and that was wrong. So I wonder if the Conservatives will just take a moment to understand that history and understand by voting against Bill C-71, they're denying once again Canadians the right to citizenship unconstitutionally.
The honourable member for Durham.
Well, once again, you can make all the arguments you want in favor of Bill C-71, but why aren't any of our questions being answered?
This
How many
guy's
people,
annihilated
where are
them.
the criminal background
Absolutely
checks,
destroying them.
and why can't we do an economic impact assessment? Put it forward as part of your legislation, but at least have the respect, have the decency to tell the Canadian people what impact their policies are going to have on our country and on our communities. At least respect the Canadian people enough to give them that information.
Yup. He is just
I want to remind
slaughtering
members
them.
if they have other questions,
Coming
they
up
should
with
wait
the
till
facts.
the appropriate time. So
All right, everyone. We are about roughly 2 minutes away from question period. We're going to be getting into this very soon here. They're currently discussing Bill C-71. I just kind of jumped in the middle of this. Not entirely sure what's going on.
Madam Speaker, they're only not having their Canadian citizenship because of an unconstitutional law created by the Conservatives. Will the member actually recognize second-generation born abroad family members are in fact Canadians, as it has been recognized by the courts?
that's right. Honourable member for Durham, a brief a brief answer.
Madam Speaker, I'm very happy to recognize that the NDP Liberals are advancing a watered-down and weak substantial connection test in Bill C-71, and that is how they're rationalizing the continued population growth in our country, despite the fact that Canadians of all backgrounds believe immigration levels are too high, the influx of people into Canada is too high, and it's putting a constraint on our economy and on our social services. Why don't they do what's best for Canada and stop being obsessed with making life harder for everyone in our country? Thank you.
Here's to that.
I just want to remind members again, if they have other questions and comments, to please wait till the appropriate time to do that, as opposed to trying to participate while someone else has the floor. We are now at statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Madam Speaker, it's Fall Fair season in Kitchener-Conestoga. Our community always looks forward to the Wellesley Fall Fair, the New Hamburg Fall Fair, and the upcoming Wellesley Apple Butter and Cheese Festival. These fairs bring us a sense of nostalgia, connecting us with our roots and the values of hard work and community that have defined Canadians for generations. Fairs help build connections between urban and rural communities, bridging the gap between farm and city. By showcasing the hard work and dedication of our farmers, they raise awareness about the importance of agriculture and inspire
Everybody
the
has
next
been so
generation of
loud.
farmers.
This guy is
I
quiet
want to
as
extend
fuck.
a heartfelt thank you to the volunteers, boards, sponsors, and agriculture.
Oh, cut off mid-speech. All right, guys. Question period should be coming up soon here. Very, very soon.
l'enceinte de la chambre.
Député de Montmagny.
Madam Speaker, last weekend, roughly 200 people gathered for the funding event for the golfing event of Saint Blanchette. Mario Leblanc, prefect, and others, as well as the provincial member and myself, accepted the honorary co-president's this campaign that raised some $400,000 thanks to the generosity of our community. This campaign would not have been possible without the commitment from our volunteers and the team. This club also has a snowmobile association and other activities. We're very proud of this event. It is so important for our community and this club. When we all work together in the same direction, we can accomplish great things. Long live this golf club. Thank you.
The honourable member from Oakville, North Burlington.
On Sunday, millions of Canadians participated in the 44th annual Terry Fox Run. In Oakville, we were joined by retired police officer Blair Vintner, who was driving the police car in the iconic black and white photo of Terry running into Oakville, taken by Peter Martin in 1980. We celebrated 44 years of hope in Oakville by welcoming almost 2,000 people and raising over $180,000 so far. Kim Shikazy participated in his 44th Terry Fox Run. Now an adult, Lisa Moody walked on her artificial leg, having survived the same cancer Terry had when she was just a young girl. For 15 years, Team Darryl has been our top fundraising team, raising over $22,000 again this year. And Unifor Local 707 came out in force for its first Oakville Terry Fox Run. Thank you to all the volunteers, donors, and participants for keeping Terry's legacy alive and ensuring we continue to realize Terry's dream of a world without cancer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouat, Taribasque. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the memory of a great patriot, Michel
here's the block again,
who
just
sadly passed away on
ramble.
August 28th at the age of 78. A great photographer, Michel immortalized the magnificent landscapes of the lower St. Lawrence region for over 45 years. On foot or by bike, from Montjoly to Matapédia, nothing escaped the camera of this great artist. Through his lens, he became a symbol of Quebec's deep attachment to their regions and their nation. He showed the world the beauty of Eastern Quebec, and for that we are all very grateful and proud. In fact, his final gift was to bequeath his treasure trove of over 15,000 works to the Library and National Archives of Quebec, wonderfully enriching our regional Quebec cultural heritage. Adieu, Michel Pierre, and thank you for everything. The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to be part of a government that understands the importance of supporting our tourism businesses and is taking action. Again this summer, in my riding of Châteauguay-Lacolle, soon to be Châteauguay-les-Jardins de Naperville, I was able to see just how much the federal government support is making a difference, enabling businesses like Parc Safari and Heritage St. Bernard to improve their service offering and attract a wider and more diversified clientele from outside the region, the province, and even the country. I would also like to highlight the excellent work of Parc Safari and Heritage St. Bernard, these teams, the two most important tourist attractions in the Monterey region. Through their initiatives, know-how, and commitment, they help us to shine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, all right. Come on now.
The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox-Naddington.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberal,
Here we go.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are now working harder and longer to bring home less, if they can afford a home at all. Their purchasing power is shot, and many live in fear of crime and chaos. Our country, Mr. Speaker, was built on the backs of the early riser, the factory workers, soldiers, nurses, bakers, servers, and night shift workers that drive Main Street through their diligent hard work. It is their tax dollars earned through blood, sweat, and tears that pays for this government's out-of-control spending. But there is hope on the horizon, Mr. Speaker, a Canada where hard work is rewarded, where there's affordable food and housing in a safe neighborhood, where everyone gets a fair shot at a good life. Mr. Speaker, a common-sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
Yay! Bravo!
Alrighty.
The honourable member from Malpeque.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the passing of my good friend Alan Andrews, also known as the Hockey Prof. As the founder of Andrews Hockey Growth Programs, Alan has impacted the lives of countless athletes around the world. Generations have benefited from his wisdom both on and off the ice and through his mentoring. His innovative curriculum has been emulated across the country and beyond. It was his unique combination of commitment to professional hockey development and personal human development that made Andrews Hockey Growth Program successful. Numerous NHL players benefit from the program, including Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Brad Richards, and Adam McQuaid, to name a few. His many accomplishments earned him the Order of Canada in 2017, and he was later inducted in the PEI Sports Hall of Fame. I'd like to extend my condolences to his wife, Lois, and family for their loss of Alan, and thank Alan for his immeasurable contribution to the sport of hockey and personal development of many young, inspiring athletes. We will continue to dream big, Al.
The honourable member from Willowdale.
I rise today to commemorate Mahsa Jina Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish-Iranian woman who was tragically killed by the Iranian regime 2 years ago. Mahsa's tragic death lit a fire of resistance across Iran and galvanized support around the world. Let me assure you that the torch of opposing gender apartheid continues to shine bright within Iran. As on other occasions in the last 2 years, large demonstrations in support of the Women Life Freedom movement took place across Canada in the last few days. I'm proud to state that more than any other country, our government has listened to the demands of protesters. Canada has revised a variety of policies to support courageous Iranians in their just cause.
What about all the Canadians living here right now that need your support?
We need to continue to support the democratic aspirations of the courageous people of Iran. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
My goodness.
The honourable member from Toronto, St. Paul's.
Thank you to the great people of Toronto St. Paul's for putting your trust in me and standing up to be counted. Thank you to my daughters, Leah and Charlotte, for your support in making my life easy. Special thanks to my campaign team led by the Amanda Phillip, with Sadaf Rastami, Harrison Rotman, and a nationwide list of volunteers. Finally, without the encouragement of my partner, Andrea, none of this would have been possible. We have shown what is possible. Toronto St. Paul's is just the beginning of Canadians choosing common sense. After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Canadians know this Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Canadians know the NDP leader is in it for his pension, while Canadians pay the price of the costly NDP Liberal policies. Only common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
I would now ask all honourable members, please, while members are making their very special Standing Order 31 statements, that we do not interrupt them. They use this for an opportunity to reach the people in their own homes, and I know everyone will want to extend this courtesy to each other. The honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, today we join millions around the world in celebrating the Mid-Autumn Festival, also known as the Moon Festival or Mooncake Festival. Not only is it an important celebration in Chinese culture, but similar celebrations are held by Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, and other Asian communities. This special day brings together family and friends. Thousands of people in Scarborough Agincourt will be celebrating by lighting beautiful lanterns and sharing delicious mooncakes.
What does this have to do with anything?
Which symbolize unity, gratitude, and prosperity. I can confirm that our local retailers are always well stocked to meet the demand. Come support our local businesses. I wish everyone a joyful and peaceful Mid-Autumn Festival.
Okay, all right. Next topic. Bring it. Let's get it going here. Come on.
Oh, thank you.
The Honourable Member for Port-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebecers are still wondering what the Bloc is for. It's Bloc that has propped up this Liberal Prime Minister for more than 200 votes. It is the most centralizing government in our history. There's no interest in the Bloc or the Quebecers giving them a blank check. The Prime Minister says one thing, but Bloc says one thing rather and does another. They keep propping up this Liberal Prime Minister, and this coalition voted to add 100,000 new public servants, more spending than ever, more public servants than ever, more scandals than ever, with Quebec's money, our money. Who does the Bloc serve? The Liberal Prime Minister. And what does the Bloc serve? Unfortunately, not Quebecers. The only party that can defend Quebecers is the Conservative Party of Canada, the Common Sense Party.
The Honourable Member from Lakeland.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. The NDP leader claimed he'd be an opposition voice, but promptly hooked up to help the Liberal Prime Minister hike taxes, food costs, double housing costs, and unleash crime and chaos in once safe Canadian streets. That's the definition of a sellout of workers, voters, and communities everywhere. Their own policies make it so Canadians can't afford to house, heat, feed, and drive themselves. So the truth is that NDP sellout supported the Liberal Prime Minister every way and every day to hike carbon taxes by 300% all the way up to 61 cents a litre. The NDP Liberal carbon tax vandalizes small businesses and charities. In Lakeland, the Two Hills Ag Society is just one example, a non-profit forced to pay over $18,000 in just 6 months on top of the cost of power. The choice is clear. The NDP Liberal Bloc coalition who tax your food, punish your work, take your money, hike your rent, risk your homes, or common sense conservatives that'll axe the tax bill, the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. So Canadians need a carbon tax election now.
Yeah.
All righty.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commemorate and honour the life of Mathieu Miljour, a man who touched the hearts of all who knew him. A former president and general manager of the Vaudreuil-Soulanges Chamber of Commerce, Mathieu worked tirelessly to support local entrepreneurs and foster growth, collaboration, and opportunity. His warmth and sincerity made people feel seen and appreciated, both in his personal and professional life. His love for our community was second only to his love for his friends and family, especially his 2 children. Although his time with us was far too short, his impact was enormous. In his memory, let us think of the joy, kindness, and passion he brought to the world. Rest in peace, our dear friend Mathieu.
The Honourable Member from Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Elmwood Transcona have spoken. And they saw right through the phony working class cosplay of the Conservatives and elected Leela Dance, a strong new Democrat who stands up for workers and their families. Because Conservatives are no friends of workers. Their leader can borrow a hard hat and pretend like he's in it for the working class, but he's never spent a second when they needed it most on the picket lines. In fact, Conservatives voted 8 times against anti-scab legislation to help out the big bosses. They'll always cut deep and backstab fast, leaving workers behind. But the people of Elmwood Transcona, they chose hope and Leela Dance and the NDP over Conservative fears and cuts. To the big bosses and the CEOs, your time is up because it's the people's time.
Wasn't it Bob Ray and the NDP that drove all the business out of Ontario in the first place? Doesn't really seem like they're for the working man.
Order.
Man, the NDP think they really had something there. They think they really had something
Colleagues.
That's too funny.
I would like everyone to continue their discussions elsewhere during
Getting
the
rowdy
members.
in the House of Commons today.
It's
Starting off
important for
early.
members to present
Question
their
period
statement.
is starting about 15 minutes late. It should be officially beginning now. I can see Pierre just walked in.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. The actress Marilyn Castingon-Gay did us proud at the Gémeaux Awards last Sunday. We've already known her for her various talents in a wide variety of roles, alongside some of the biggest names in theatre, film, and series. Now, she's part of the prestigious club of great Quebec actresses, winning the Best Award for lead actress in a drama series for her lustrous character of Huguette Delisle, a high-caliber housewife and criminal in the popular Quebec series C'est comme ça que je t'aime. What an actress and what a talented woman. Bravo, Marlene. And she's also from Marsouin. Bravo, yes, she is from Île-aux-Coudres. Forgive my pride, but in my region, like all of Quebec, is very proud of Marlene Castonguay. Congratulations to my little cousin from the Garcette line of Cap à la Branche. We are all so proud of you.
Order. The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Conflict of interest Carbon Tax Carney has officially joined the corrupt Liberal government as the de facto
Carbon
finance
Tax
minister,
Carney.
here to ram the Davos agenda down the throats of Canadians. This global elite jet sets around the world, claiming the carbon tax scam is a global example that no one should be exempt from, including Atlantic Canadians. He sits on boards of multinational corporations with interests for foreign oil, for foreign governments, opposing Canada's good, clean, responsible oil and gas. The Prime Minister has shielded him from Canadian disclosure laws by making him an advisor instead of replacing this lame duck finance minister. Carbon Tax Carney is here for Carbon Tax Carney, here for all the power and money and none of the accountability. He could care less about Canadians who can't afford to feed, heat, or house themselves. Common sense Conservatives are calling on the Prime Minister to force Carbon Tax Carney to be sworn in as a public office holder, so he has to follow Canada's conflict of interest laws. Time to come clean. Conflict of interest, Carbon Tax Carney.
The Honourable Member from Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, on September 17, 1999, Donald Marshall Jr. stood victorious in his case that affirmed the Mi'kmaq had a treaty right to sell fish according to the terms of the peace and friendship treaties. This historic case changed the economic future for the Mi'kmaq. Not only could treaties be used to survive, but now they were able to thrive. Thousands of Mi'kmaq jobs have been created within the fisheries, allowing Mi'kmaq to become major players within the Atlantic fisheries. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have a long way to go in full implementation of the Mi'kmaq treaties, but we continue to work with Mi'kmaq communities to ensure they can exercise their right to a living while balancing conservation and safety. We remember the Marshall case as a turning point for the Mi'kmaq and how it cemented the legacy of Donald Marshall Jr. as a hero for our people. Today, I remember my late friend Junior and honor all those who continue to advocate for their treaty rights moving forward. Walaliek, thank you.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the
Here we go. Here we go.
Voters in Liberal strongholds in Toronto and Montreal have rendered their verdict. This Prime Minister, after 9 years, is not worth the cost. After 9 years of this Bloc Liberal government, we've seen the greatest expansion in the federal government in history, the most expensive centralizing government, including when it comes to the cost of housing and groceries in Quebec. How can the Bloc keep this government in power when it's so bad for Quebec? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy to have the opportunity to answer a question that has to do with the Canadian economy, because it gives me the opportunity to celebrate some good news that we got this morning. Inflation was 2%, and that's back to pre-pandemic levels. It's such good news for our country. Conservatives should be celebrating that. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure people who are waiting on waiting lists for food banks or lineups for food banks, or who are living in camps or homeless shelters, they'll be celebrating today. They'll really be celebrating the fact that after the highest inflation in 40 years, prices are still going up. They're not going back down. So the question is, why does the Bloc want to keep the most centralizing, expensive government in power when they have no respect for Quebec's jurisdiction or for Quebecers? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is showing once again that he's incompetent when it comes to the economy. The fact is that
because the economy has been so good under you.
Is
you've
where
done
Canada
such a great
was
job, Freeland.
Before the pandemic. The fact is that since the beginning of this year, inflation was within the Bank of Canada's target range. The fact is that for 19 months now, wages have outstripped inflation. But Conservatives just want bad news for Canadians.
Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians in the former Liberal strongholds of Toronto and Montreal have now given their verdict. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. Mr. Speaker, isn't it time for Canadians to have a chance to render their verdict right across the country, electing a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
We need it.
I ask members,
Our
especially
country
members on the
badly
far
needs
side of the
it.
House, to please not to take the microphone until they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about the economy. That is because today we had good news for Canadians. Inflation is back down to where it was before COVID hit. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range this whole year. Wages have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful that for them, good news for Canadians is bad news that they want to ignore.
You've created all the problems.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this incompetent finance minister would tell you that you should celebrate that after prices rising faster than at any time in 40 years, they continue to rise, just not as quickly. I'm sure the people living in tent encampments, or the record-smashing 2 million people lined up at food banks, or the 1 in 4 kids going to school hungry after 9 years of this government will be celebrating. But what we now find out is that it's worse than we thought. According to a document just released, the government's second carbon tax will cost $9 billion in lost GDP. Why won't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
What the fuck are we doing as a country? $9 billion.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know why the Conservatives are so panicked about
Just
it.
answer his question.
It's because they can see that the economic news is good. they can see that we are now back to exactly where we were before COVID hit. They can see the Bank of Canada has lowered interest rates 3 times in a row, and wages have been ahead of inflation for 19 months. That's good news for Canadians. It's bad news for Conservatives.
And once again, I apologize. Normally, I would indicate out of respect to all members by saying the Honourable, and I forgot to do that in this case. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The bad news is we now have 1,800 homeless encampments in Ontario. 35 in Halifax alone. 2 million Canadians lined up at food banks after 9 years of NDP Liberal government. And now that we learn that on top of the $25 billion annual hit of the first carbon tax to our GDP, the second carbon tax will subtract another $9 billion a year. Over $35 billion in lost GDP. That's almost $2,000 per family. Why won't this costly NDP Liberal government allow Canadians to vote on the carbon tax?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister
Jagmeet
of
wants his
Finance.
pension.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about housing because there is more good news Canadians should know about. And that is that we have extended to 30 years amortizations for all first-time home buyers. That means more young Canadians can buy that first home and afford that mortgage. We've extended to 30 years amortizations for all new homes. That's to encourage what we know we all need, more homes built faster. But these weak and spiteful Conservatives cannot celebrate good news for Canadians because it's bad news for their partisan interests.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Oh boy, here we go. What does this guy got to say? Look at him, he's so full of himself too. He's like, I'm so great. Look at me. I am so cool. What a fucking guy.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be able to answer the question from the Leader of the Opposition, but I'll answer this way. 4th place in La Salle Aymar Verdun. So we're still working on the seniors file and doing so well that we're going to have to make room for one more seat on our benches. Is this government in favor of C-319, and will they ensure that this bill, which everyone in the House voted for, makes it all the way through? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. Our government understands the importance of supporting our seniors, and that's what we've done, and what we've done from the outset. That's what we did after 10 years of the Conservatives who punished our seniors. That's why we added supports for our seniors, especially for the most vulnerable seniors, as was the right thing to do. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. C-319 is a block bill that would eliminate the discrimination in the OAS for seniors aged 65 to 74 and those 75 and over, and instead of allowing for $5,000 to $6,000 in wages without losing the GIS. At committee, all parties voted in favor of our bill. Now, will the government ensure that this bill gets implemented because it requires a royal recommendation? Will the Liberals give that recommendation and support seniors, yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we
I guess Trudeau's taken another vacation. Not shocking.
The oldest seniors, those at 75 and over, have higher costs and are more vulnerable. That is why we added support for them. And I share with the Bloc a concern for our seniors, and that's why I would ask the Bloc to support us when it comes to dental care. That's an important program for all Quebecers, and especially for vulnerable seniors. The honourable member for Burnaby South.
The Liberals have let people down again and again, and they are done. It's clear from the results of the election last night. The Liberals are done. Maybe it's because they keep on teaming up with the Conservatives to let greedy CEOs continue to rip off Canadians. In fact, inflation numbers show that grocery greed has driven up the food prices more than 21% in the past 3 years. Why did the Liberals team up with the Conservatives to protect greedy CEOs from a price cap on food essentials?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the NDP and indeed all members of this House will set partisanship aside for one moment to congratulate Canadians at the light at the end of the tunnel, at the fact that after an extremely challenging time with COVID and its economic aftermath, inflation is back to where it was before COVID first hit. When it comes to taxes, we believe that those who have the most capacity should pay their fair share, and we've acted on that.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Liberals have continued to team up with the Conservatives to let grocery greed drive up the price of food, and that's got to stop.
Yesterday, it became clear that people are finished with the Liberals. It's because they worked with the Conservatives to allow real estate giants hike rents by over 20%. Why do the Liberals keep teaming up with the Conservatives and allowing these giants rip people off? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
I think anybody listening to Question Period today, or frankly any day,
here we go,
imagines that the Liberals are teaming up with the Conservatives.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Maybe the most intelligent thing she said in her entire career.
They are the party of privilege and austerity.
And then she goes right back to being stupid.
Of people. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we have asked those at the very top to pay their fair share so that we can support Canada and Canadians.
It's so funny, Jagmeet's sitting there blaming Liberals and Conservatives for teaming up when they have been together the whole time, NDP Liberal.
Female finance minister, again, is being publicly humiliated by the fake feminist prime minister. What's worse is that she's being replaced by an unelected man outside of her own caucus who her boss is now shielding from conflict of interest laws that allow him to take her job and keep his money. A man who works against our resource sector, who exports jobs to China while championing higher carbon taxes on heating and eating for Canadians. Why won't the finance minister talk to her boss about ending the personal attacks on her own credibility?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about feminism, because I know what a feminist government looks like. A feminist government builds the first national system of early learning and childcare. Makes contraceptives free, and a feminist government ensures that every single woman in Canada has full control over her body. Until the Conservatives stand up to that, they have no right to talk
about it. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Fake feminist prime minister throws his finance minister under the bus with all the other ministers. The real record of this finance minister is record smashing 1 million people visiting a food bank in her province. In Ontario, 1 in 4 Canadians living in poverty. Canadians now spend more in taxes than they do on housing, on food, and on clothes combined. No wonder they're putting the training wheels back on for her. She can tell that to the Prime Minister.
Where is the Prime Minister? Where is he?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister
On
of
another
Finance.
vacation.
Mr. Speaker, I've stood up to Trump, and I have stood up to Putin.
She stood up to Trump, guys. Watch out. Watch out.
From the
Holy
wannabe
shit.
MAGA maple syrup conservatives. Do
Mega
not
maple syrup.
try
What is she
to
talking
at
about?
all.
Why can't we just stick to Canadian politics? Why are they so obsessed with the States?
That they don't actually want to talk about the economy. And that's because good economic news for Canadians is bad news for them. How pathetic that they put their own partisan interest first.
Unreal.
The Honourable Member from Haldimand Norfolk.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. This self-proclaimed feminist Prime Minister has repeatedly shoved aside strong women who have stood up to him. Now the Prime Minister is replacing the first ever female finance minister with an unelected Mark Carbon Tax Carney. Why is this finance minister allowing herself to be publicly humiliated in this manner?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is a bit rich to hear the member of the Conservative Party pretend to care about feminism when their own leader was using misogynistic hashtags on their videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it was anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion and to take away women's right to choose their own rights, Mr. Speaker, or when they all voted against increased funding to combat gender-based violence or to support survivors. Mr. Speaker, their leader doesn't care about women or equality. He only cares about himself.
The Honourable Member from Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, it's so sad. They're not even allowing the finance minister to answer because they all...
Oh,
Order.
here we go.
Order. The Honourable Member from Haldimand Norfolk, from the top, please.
From the top? Mr. Speaker, they're not even allowing the finance minister to answer her own questions because they all know that the carbon tax is a failure. Canadians are suffering. There are over 1,800 homeless encampments in Ontario alone. 26% of Canadians are saying that they are considering leaving the country because it is too expensive. A single mother in Kingston reported paying 100% of her income in rent. Will this finance minister admit that the Prime Minister has lost confidence in her and Canadians have lost confidence in this government?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives keep talking about women, but they don't support policies that support women.
Right.
Why are they against affordable childcare? If they care about that single mother, they should be supporting affordable childcare. Mr. Speaker, if they care about women's economic freedom, they should be supporting childcare. If they care about women's rights, they should be supporting a woman's right to choose. The real fake feminists, Mr. Speaker, are the people who sit on that side of the aisle.
It's kind of weird how they think that there's no single fathers out there or anything like that.
The Honourable Member from
Kinda strange.
Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. This Prime Minister's new de facto finance minister, Carbon Tax Carney, has massive conflicts of interest, including multiple foreign investment firms. Canadians don't know how much he personally stands to profit from the advice that he's giving to the Prime Minister. It's more blatant corruption from this NDP Liberal government. So will the Prime Minister simply have Carbon Tax Carney sworn in as a public office holder so that the full extent of Canada's disclosure laws apply to him too?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike Unlike the Conservatives, we do believe in listening to experts from across the country. But let's talk about where the Conservatives get their ideas. The Conservative leader gets his advice on helping Canadians with their grocery bills from a Loblaws lobbyist. He gets his advice on Ukraine from Elon Musk and from Tucker Carlson. And he has courted the support of misogynists and cozied up to the far right. Those are the advisors Canadians should be really concerned about.
The far right. Typical buzzword
from Regina Capel has stood in this place and understands the importance of calling members to order so that those who do have the floor.
This guy cannot command a room. We need a new speaker.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Holy shit.
It's absolutely absurd to hear the finance minister give anyone lessons about who they're taking advice from. Arch-liberal elitist Mark Carney. This guy has more conflicts than the twice guilty and convicted prime minister of their party. And they're letting carbon tax Carney keep all the money and all the power by covering up his massive conflicts of interest while giving away that finance minister's job. He makes millions from foreign investment firms, and now he's advising the prime minister. So why is the prime minister letting carbon tax Carney keep the money and the power and serving as the real finance minister?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely shameful what the Conservatives are doing. When there is a Canadian who doesn't agree with their vision for Canada, what do? Attack them. Whether it's anybody who doesn't agree with what the Conservatives do, the only thing they know how to do is denigrate that person. Mr. Speaker, we should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. We should be able to hear advice from a whole wide range of actors without attacking their character and bringing down fellow Canadians. They should be ashamed of their actions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring something to the government's attention, something that won't happen. The Bloc will not agree to tolerating encroachment on Quebec's jurisdiction in exchange for this or that. That won't happen. The Liberal government has to be consistent. They should implement a bill that they voted for. It's got to be one of two ways. Either they get the NDP to support them or they'll pay the price. The Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, speaking of clarity, will the leader of the Bloc Québécois clarify what exactly he said or would say to hundreds of thousands of Quebecers who today benefit from free dental care that he voted against? The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. It's not really clear what was voted against or in favor of. I've never voted in favor of an intrusion on Quebec's jurisdiction. The Liberals have a block bill now in their hands. All it takes is a royal recommendation. They say that we're not going to get it, and so the block bill will never go through, and seniors will never get their money. That petty little game is what they want to play. If they are not willing to do this, then we're heading for an election.
Damn right we're heading for an election.
The Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, the spectre of an election is not going to stop us from delivering the goods for Quebecers. That's a bit much. A vote is a very clear thing, I would say to the Bloc leader. It's not as ambiguous as he claims. When they vote, when the Bloc leader votes, he votes against lowering the retirement age to 65. He voted against increasing the GIS for poor seniors in Quebec. And when we brought in dental care, he voted against that too. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Let's repeat. The Bloc votes against all intrusions into Quebec's jurisdiction, whether that intrusion is all by itself or in an omnibus bill. C-319 is something that you guys voted for. So follow through here. Be consistent. Make sure it enters into force. Try to rectify the injustice that you yourselves created. So for once, try to vote a little bit intelligently and a little bit consistently. The Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc leader has spent his entire life putting Quebecers' CPP in danger, and he voted against lowering the retirement age to 65, and that had nothing to do with Quebec's jurisdiction. He was voting against seniors when he voted against increasing the GIS. That had nothing to do with Quebec's jurisdiction, and still he voted against it. He voted against the well-being of Quebecers. He voted in favor of poverty among seniors in Quebec. The Bloc leader needs to be a bit consistent here and take responsibility for his actions. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, taxes are going up, costs are going up, crime is up, the pressure is up on the Liberals after 9 years of this Prime Minister with the support of the Bloc. People are living in trailers, they can't afford rent. People have written in saying, how am I supposed to afford food, insurance, and so on? This is the harsh reality of 9 years of this government with its Bloc friends. Does the Bloc realize that if they keep it up, it'll mean more and more poverty for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no one here who believes the Conservative hypocrisy when they claim they're concerned about putting roofs over people's heads. The only thing they want to do is cut funding for construction of housing. They want to rip up all the agreements that have been signed with cities all over the country. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are going to continue building the housing people need. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and the pressure is building on the Liberal government. After 9 years, this Liberal government, supported by the Bloc, has led to disastrous consequences. People are crying for help. From Sherbrooke, the small food banks are starving. Imagine that, a food bank that's starving. But that's the situation. The centralizing, spendthrift Liberal government keeps on burning through money. But Canadians, Quebecers deserve to make a choice to have a common-sense government as quickly as possible.
And the food banks are running out of food because we have record numbers.
I'd be pleased to answer an expert on infrastructure on the path to austerity. The Conservatives, look at what they've done in the regions when it comes to fisheries. They cut 80 million to science. They cut to small ports for small craft. They voted against investments in those small ports. They voted against support for families, against programs for seniors. That's all they know how to do, Mr. Speaker. All they can do is be austere for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, no sooner had we freed ourselves of the NDP who supported the most disastrous government in history than we found ourselves once again caught up in a saga with the Bloc Liberal coalition. What's the point of the Bloc when they vote for $500 billion of this Prime Minister's inflationary spending and his bloated bureaucracy in Ottawa, with Quebec's money adding 100,000 more public servants to the government machine? Mr. Speaker, we saw it yesterday. There's no real difference between the Bloc and the Liberals. So who or what does the Bloc Liberal coalition serve? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, my colleague can shout as loud as he wants, but Quebecers know very well. They remember what they did when they were in power. They made cuts to science, to family supports. They've cut everything they could because that's the only thing they know how to do is austerity. They don't know how to invest in the potential of Canadians. And that's precisely what they're going to do if they get another kick at the can. So Quebecers want nothing to do with the Conservatives. He can shout for all he's worth, but the Quebecers aren't listening to him. I'd just like to remind the member from Mégantic-L'Érable that after asking a question, it's important to allow someone else to answer.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the bloc is costing Canadians a lot of money, and it's costing Quebecers a lot of money. We've witnessed the greatest expansion of the public service in history. More public services than ever, more scandals than ever. Now, they're keeping the Liberals alive. That's what the bloc is doing.
We need a new translator. What's going on here?
Well, Mr. Speaker, here we hear the voice of conservative austerity. People at home know what the Liberal Party has done. Investments are up. The economy is up. Quebecers know that with Liberals, we are building the future, whether it's the auto sector or elsewhere, manufacturing. We are building Canada for the 21st century. We will be there to defend Canadians.
The honourable member from Edmonton, Griesbach.
Over the span of 19 days, 7 Indigenous people were killed by police. Communities are disturbed, but unfortunately these tragedies are known all too well by Indigenous people. This is colonialism and systemic racism that continues to persist under consecutive governments. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit have the solutions to end this violence. No more Indigenous children getting a bullet instead of help. Why won't the Minister of Public Safety act to ensure accountability and justice for these families?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the comments and I appreciate the passion from my colleague, and I agree that we need to do more in this country around Indigenous policing. And that's why the Liberals, including myself, put forward a motion at the INAN Committee in April saying, let's study this.
Yeah, Trudeau, he didn't show up today. He's probably on another vacation.
Entire ability to have a unanimous motion here that says, let's address this. I'm talking about tangible solutions. I'd love to see the NDP join us with those tangible solutions and study this and hear from Indigenous leaders.
Leader of the country not showing up to his own job. Not shocking, but it's how he is.
The honourable member from Nunavut.
Johannes Rivor sexually abused Inuit children in Nunavut for years. Canada refused to charge him for 30 years, and he died protected. Daughter of the late Marius Tungelik has asked the RCMP for his files, but they refused to release it. This government must honor families, especially to those who suffered during residential schools. Will the Minister of Public Safety provide the documents, or will they help to keep the files hidden from this family?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question and raising these important issues with us in this place. Ensuring that justice is done for victims and their families is crucially important. It's something I know the minister takes incredibly seriously, and we will continue to work on this specific case with her. When it comes to dealing with systemic racism in policing, this is a crucial issue that we are focused on addressing. It is something we have made progress on, but by no means is it complete. There is much more work to do, and we are committed to doing it.
L'honorable député, the honourable member from London West.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Immigration and Citizenship introduced Bill C-71, and as Canadians, we can never take our rights for granted. We must remain vigilant when politicians, especially when the leader of the opposition suggests that he would use a notwithstanding clause if given the chance. Like the first generation limit introduced by the Conservatives is a concrete example of them taking away the rights of Canadians. Can the Minister of Immigration and Citizenship explain to this House the importance of Bill C-71?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration and Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for her personal passion in this file. What we see and what we are debating before this House is a bill that fixes the egregious breaches of the Charter that the Conservatives, including the Leader of the Opposition, perpetrated on women, on children of people born abroad. And this is something that we as a House need to fix. It is a Charter violation. It is a particular instance of the Leader of the Opposition, supported by his previous government, in breaching Charter rights. When Canadians say there's nothing to worry about, that isn't the case. There's lots to worry about with the Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Lissetchement-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, what is the Bloc Québécois good for? Well, they're good for keeping the Liberals in power. They voted to save the Liberals more than 200 times. The Bloc Québécois voted for $500 billion in inflationary spending and helped to increase the ranks of the public service by 100,000. They pretend to help Quebecers, but they support this government. What did the Liberals promise the Bloc? The Honourable President of Treasury Board. Mr. Speaker, we have the best public service in the world, and we are continuing to invest in Canadians, the most vulnerable, families, children, seniors. And what about the Conservatives? Every time they vote against these measures, we're here for Canadians. We're here to build a country, Mr. Speaker.
Well, you've been destroying the country,
member,
not building
Mr.
it.
Speaker, Bloc, Liberal, same thing. They help protect the Liberals and keep them in power. So more inflationary spending, a doubling debt. So the Bloc is voting for squandering Quebecers' money. The Bloc voted for the greatest expansion of the public service ever recorded. How did the Prime Minister convince the Bloc to support this government, which has been the most disastrous and the most centralizing in Canadian history? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the secret agenda is coming out. People are afraid of hundreds of thousands of layoffs, and here we have the confirmation made by my colleague across the way. Their secret agenda is to fire thousands and thousands of public servants here in this area, in this region, and across Canada. We have the future to care about. That member has just shown what the Conservatives' secret game is.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, grocery prices are up, time is up. According to Feed Ontario, more than 1 million people were forced to food banks just to feed their family. This is a record-shattering increase of 25%. This stark reality is fueled by the Liberal NDP carbon tax, which is driving up grocery prices. Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. Will the Prime Minister end this suffering and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Speaker, we all suffer when we know that some of our fellow Canadians are suffering. We've made historic investments as a government, delivering programs investing in Canadians' well-being. But let's not kid ourselves. The Conservatives would cut these very programs that Canadians are relying on. They would cut childcare. They would cut the food program for kids in school. And they would increase the retirement age. They would cut, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from
People are having to work
Yes,
later
we will cut.
because of how bad the economy
tax.
is.
The government's own statistics show that more than 9 million Canadians are suffering with food insecurity, struggling to put food on the table. After 9 years, the number of Canadians that are facing food insecurity is up a staggering 111%. These aren't just statistics. These are millions of parents who can't feed their kids. This is a result of the costly Liberal carbon tax and their NDP coalition partners that are driving up the costs on farmers, on truckers, and on food production. Stick a fork in this government and call a carbon tax election.
The Honourable Minister for Families.
And we've just heard it, Mr. Speaker. They have just admitted that they would cut the very programs that Canadian families
He said he'd cut the carbon tax. Lying right through her teeth. Lying right through her teeth with that one.
Colleagues, it's very difficult for me to hear.
Colleagues, please stop.
It's very difficult for me to hear the minister respond. I'm going to give the minister 30 seconds to respond to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there you have it. The Conservatives have just confirmed that they will cut
the carbon tax
that Canadian families are relying on. $10 a day childcare, saving families thousands of dollars. National school food program ensuring that children are not at school hungry. Mr. Speaker, you heard it here. They plan to cut the supports that Canadian families need.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, nothing is moving in the asylum seekers file. They promised, the Liberals promised, they would do something this fall, but here we are, it's fall, and no plan. Quebec is continuing to deal with the extraordinary number of asylum seekers. Let's be clear, Quebecers will continue to do their share, but they're tired of doing it alone. When will the government come up with its plan, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, we need a plan that will work for all of Canada. There are two provinces doing more than their fair share. That's Ontario and Quebec. Other provinces have to fall in line. We have to do things on an organizational level, but we shouldn't instrumentalize certain things, as some premiers are doing. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, let's talk about those provinces who are refusing to help Quebecers. Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Alberta, what do they have in common? Conservative premiers. And these Conservative premiers are telling Quebecers, you deal with your problems, you deal with the asylum seekers. Now, let's be clear. The Minister of Immigration is responsible for this file. But what about all these Conservative leaders who are pushing the problem over to Quebecers? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's clear. It's dangerous to have politicians who make hay on the backs of asylum seekers.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and after 9 years, time's up. Over the summer, I heard too many heartbreaking stories of folks struggling to get by. The NDP Liberals' carbon tax is making life unaffordable. Now, after voting for it 24 times, the NDP even say that they are abandoning the carbon tax. So my question to the minister is simple. Will the Liberals join their coalition partners to axe the carbon tax?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the price on pollution and the Canada Carbon Rebate are an affordability measure. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back than they pay in the price on pollution.
Not
and the
true.
price on pollution is also an effective
So
and efficient
far
way to
from
fight
true.
climate change.
I receive
That's why
carbon tax
progressives,
payments
including many who voted
quarterly, every 3 months, and it's roughly $120. That is not enough to fill 1 tank of gas.
that to their voters down the road.
I highly doubt anybody out there is getting upwards of $2,000, maybe $3,000 a month to every 3 months in a carbon tax. It's just not happening.
By design meant to raise prices, and the consequences are devastating. In Red Deer, Alberta, a city of only 100,000 people, have seen usage skyrocket in recent years to 30,000, and this year they're on track to have 40,000 individuals that need help from this food bank. That's in a city, Mr. Speaker, of less than 100,000 people. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is simple. Will the Liberals call a carbon tax election so that Canadians can decide to axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said a moment ago, the Canada Carbon Rebate and the price on pollution are in fact an affordability measure that help those that live on modest incomes the most. It is certainly true that 300 economists in this country have validated that to be true. The leader of the opposition and his minions across the way can make up facts, can talk about untruths, but at the end of the day, it is very clear that this is a progressive policy that helps us to fight climate change and address affordability concerns. I would ask the honourable member across the way to actually do his homework.
I'd recommend this guy actually go speak to Canadians who are getting this tax.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs up, crimes up, and guess what? Time is up. This costly coalition is hurting Canadians. Over 9 million Canadians don't know where their next meal is going to come from. That's 111% increase of Canadians facing food insecurity. And quadrupling the carbon tax will only make things worse. Canadians cannot afford any more media stunts from this costly coalition. Will the Prime Minister just end the suffering and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, as we've just returned from the summer break, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the programs that the Conservative government professes to want to cut. Over the summer, we've made a number of announcements on new, affordable $10 a day childcare spots. Oh, look at this, 600 new spots in BC, 950 new spots in Manitoba. Oh, here we are, 5,000 new spots over the next year in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. And what do the Conservatives say? No more affordable childcare. Shame.
L'honorable député de Saint-Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, over the last year, Canadians expressed their concern with vehicle theft. We took their concerns to heart and acted. We have put new funding into the budget in order to fight vehicle theft. Can the Minister of Justice give us an idea
Stop dumping
of the
money
measures
into this
taken
thing and
to
just
deal with
put
this
people
scourge?
in prison. If
The
they are
Honourable
fucking stealing
Minister of
cars,
Justice,
they should not
Mr.
be let
Speaker,
free the next day.
Over the first half of this
Dumping
year,
more money into it
vehicle
is not going to
theft
save
has
it.
fallen by 36% over last year. This follows on an increase in penalties and in the allocation of funds for border agents and for our police forces.
Hey, that's good. We need more funding for the police.
After the cuts
But we
made
also
by
need
this,
to have stricter laws against people who are
Conservative
doing
government,
these things.
We are proud to be
They're
working
getting released
for
a week
Quebecers
later.
and all Canadians. Thank you.
From Kildonan and St. Paul.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crimes up, and time's up. Under their watch, women and children are being victimized and violated by criminals that under Liberal policies are being let out on bail, house arrest, and parole. And after 9 years, the results are truly terrible, Mr. Speaker. Sexual assaults, for example, are up 75%, and sexual violations against children are up 120% under their watch, Mr. Speaker. When will the Liberals put the needs of the victims first and ensure jail, not bail, for repeat violent offenders?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, we take community safety extremely seriously. It is my top priority. What we have done since I've taken office is we've increased the penalties on people who would target individuals, including people who target people's automobiles. We have funded police to the tune of $161 million to assist them in their important work. What I can advise the member opposite is three important things. The people who are making decisions on bail are provincially appointed justices of the peace or provincial judges. The people who decide to appeal decisions on bail are provincial crown attorneys. And the people who decide whether offenders have a place to go when they're denied bail, those are provincial correctional facilities. Talk to the provinces.
Wasn't this the same government that called for defunding the police when a bunch of crazy things were happening a few years back, if you catch my drift?
Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crime's up, time's up. And so are job losses because of this incompetent Liberal fisheries minister. She doesn't listen to Atlantic Canada's fishing communities. The industry is left in the dark. Even former DFO scientists say she's playing politics with lives and livelihoods. In July, the fisheries minister cut the Bay of Fundy herring quota by 24%. The result, over 100 job losses. Will she do her job and restore these fish, reverse the cuts?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to assure my colleague that we have very close relationships with fishers, and for years now we have noted that herring stocks are suffering in the Gulf of the St. Lawrence. But he should think about shrimp in the St. Lawrence. We have helped in this area, contrary to the Conservatives, who would fish until every species is extinct. The herring stock has fallen,
That's
but
such
we
a
are not
fucking
fishing it as much in
loaded
order to conserve
statement. There are laws that ban fishing till the species is extinct.
The honourable member for Cumberland
It's actually insane.
Speaker, after
that she
9
would
years
say
of this
that.
NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, fisheries crime is up, and the time is up. The situation in Nova Scotia's fishing communities, which has previously been described as lawlessness, continues to deteriorate. In spite of repeated warnings, the incompetent Minister of Fisheries and Oceans refuses to do anything. There is significant concern that the situation will spiral out of control. When will this woefully inadequate minister realize the importance of the Atlantic Canadian fishery and the very real threat to lives and livelihoods, and do her job?
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that my colleague across the way has a very poor memory. We have only to think of the moratorium on deepwater fish and about what happened to shrimp last winter. It was catastrophic for our regions. Climate change in the Gulf of the St. Lawrence, which is affecting all fish stocks. It's a real shame what I'm hearing across the way, and yet I'm not surprised because the Conservatives don't believe in climate change. We will make those decisions that are best for the industry.
Member from Kings Head.
Speaker, this summer millions of Canadians tuned in to the CBC and Radio Canada to cheer on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. Our athletes pushed limits, set new records, and brought us all together via the power of sport. In King's Hands, we are deeply proud of the Kennecook Kid, Wyatt Sanford, who won Canada's first Olympic bronze medal since 1996 when he took home the bronze. I even had the chance to spar and throw punches with him and the Prime Minister this summer. Can the Minister of Sport let this House know how we're supporting athletes like Wyatt so they can keep
Trudeau
representing Canada
sparring
with pride
and boxing,
and excellence?
doing random shit instead of actually trying to fix the country.
Minister of Sport.
Good
Thank you very
fucking
much,
Lord,
Mr.
man.
Speaker. Canadians from coast to coast to coast proudly celebrated the exceptional performances of Team Canada this past summer. Canadians won a record number of medals, inspired the next generation of Olympic and Paralympic athletes, and and made us deeply proud. Our government supports athletes. We increased the amounts of the Athlete Assistance Program, which supports over 1,800 athletes monthly in 94 disciplines. Mr. Speaker, our athletes dream big and work hard, and we've got the results to prove it.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, $200 a month is not enough to live on. Yet that's what the Prime Minister has decided is enough for people with disabilities.
Shame.
While he caves to rich CEOs, he fails to protect the human rights of Canadians. And then there's the Conservatives, who always cut the supports people need.
Yep.
Both the Liberals and the Conservatives care more about their rich corporate donors than they do about Canadians. When will the Liberals get real and increase the Canada Disability Benefit and respect Canadians with disabilities?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Youth, Diversity and Disabilities.
Mr. Speaker, we put forward over $6 billion to create the first ever Canada Disability Benefit. But Mr. Speaker, we won't take any lessons from the NDP, who has started to take orders from the Conservative Party and abandon their commitments to delivering progressive policies. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're focused on delivering this historic benefit to Canadians.
The honourable member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the City of Windsor is tired of being abused by this Liberal government when it comes to the border. A private American billionaire now wants to run hazardous material on the Ambassador Bridge. This is bad for the environment, bad for the economy, and an unnecessary risk for public safety. The Liberals tried passing the buck to the province, but Doug Ford doesn't care. My community deserves answers and a government that stands up for them, not the American billionaire who owns the bridge. Will the Liberals stop caving to the billionaires and put an end to this disaster waiting to happen?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell the member what the Windsor is about. Windsor is about a revival, Mr. Speaker. With the investment we brought in Windsor, Windsor will never look the same again, Mr. Speaker. We have brought generational investment in this town. We have given hope to people. We are providing opportunities. We're providing training for the people. Windsor will be at the center again of the auto sector, Mr. Speaker. And this is thanks to a Liberal government and this team, Mr. Speaker. We should all cheer up for Canadians. Cheer up for Windsor and cheer up for the auto workers in this country.
We cheer for them.
Colleagues, and so brings to an end of oral questions. It being
Alrighty.
3:15 p.m.
That is going to be it for question period. Shocker, Trudeau didn't show up to his own job. We were also told Trudeau spent the summer boxing with Olympians instead of doing his job. Guys, when the election comes, just make sure you vote. Whoever you vote for, I'm not going to tell you, but just make sure you get out there. And I'd also like to briefly address whoever was in the comment section trolling. Look, I'm not going to ban or block anybody. Make sure you have a conversation with them and point out their stupidity. I would just like to thank everybody for joining us today. I believe question period will happen again tomorrow. It's happening every day for this week and next week. So if you come back tomorrow, you come back. If not, thank you for joining.